Hey everyone, and welcome to Konoha Reviews. Though usually we review games on this channel, in the past I have reviewed movies and TV shows as well in the form of Dune, Mandalorian, and Squid Game, and though those were all worth your time, the recent show I saw was so bad that I just had to make a review about it. The show Velma has gathered a lot of negative news over the past few days. But the reason why I thought it was worth talking about is that the show actually exceeded my expectation of how bad it was, despite my expectations being so low already due to the negative news. For this review, I will put up some gameplay of the Scooby-Doo games that star the crew and characters that we know and love, instead of those that star in this god-awful show. So let's take a step back first, and talk about the creation of this series. Scooby-Doo is of course a long-lasting cartoon show that started in the 70s and still exists today, with new entries in the form of movies and series still coming out. It follows a group of teenagers accompanied by their giant talking dog Scooby-Doo as they solve mysteries that have a tint of horror on them. They can even be somewhat seen as an introduction to horror for children, or the introduction to the whodunit genre, as there's always a twist at the end of an episode to see who dressed up as the monster or ghost. It kinda was a fun experience to join the gang on their adventure and see if you could spot clues as to who was responsible. Now, with a franchise that has lasted this long, it is important to note that there already have been alternate versions and adaptations of the Scooby Gang. So the fact that they created Velma and made alterations should not come as a surprise and has been done before. There's a show where the Scooby Gang are still kids and Scoob is just a pup. Then there's a Lego version of Scooby-Doo, and there are slight variations of the character art in various series and movies, and there also is of course the live-action Scooby-Doo movie and its sequel. And I never thought I'd say this, but the show Velma resulted in me having more respect for the Scooby-Doo live-action movie. See, though I don't hate the Scooby-Doo live-action movie, I also don't find it very good or funny in that regard. But at least the characters feel like how they are portrayed in the other Scooby-Doo properties. Shaggy feels like Shaggy, Velma feels like Velma, etc. Honestly, I now find the live-action film much more enjoyable to watch after having sat through 2 episodes of Velma. Go figure. So the fact that the creators wanted to make an adult-oriented cartoon spin-off from Scooby-Doo should not be something people should get upset about, since many spin-offs already exist. But it's the execution that is so incredibly miserable that makes this show pure agony to sit through. So let's see why exactly it is so awful. In the show, we follow Velma in her high school days as a mystery surrounding murdered schoolgirls gets her involved in all kinds of trouble. Immediately, within the first 2 minutes, the show becomes clear that it has a lot of meta jokes, but meta jokes that simply don't work. Character Daphne makes multiple remarks about how TV shows use nudity in their first episode, and then proceeds to show the high schoolers taking a shower with their private parts being covered in soap bubbles. Very funny, right? Right? Or, maybe a minute later, they make a remark about race-blind casting, which is yet another meta joke as it points towards the characters of Velma, Daphne, and Shaggy that have been race-swapped. Velma this time is Indian, Daphne is Asian, and Shaggy is black. Only Fred is still white because, well, white man bad, as the show points out. But the simple fact is that these jokes just do not land, and many of the jokes and punchlines are snarky, hateful, and outright judgmental towards others. Which is ironic, because I'm sure that the writers thought that they were being inclusive and open with this writing, but it's simply vile towards everyone who has a different opinion to them. I'm open and inclusive to everyone except those who think different. That is basically what this show's writing entails. Velma is incredibly unlikable. She is being bullied and ridiculed, but ridicules others in the exact same way. More than one joke is being brought up on people being fat, and Velma's weight itself gets brought up as well. But then they have no problem making jokes about Fred's tiny junk, which is a joke they repeat multiple times. And listen, I honestly do not care about jokes regarding people being fat or tiny penises or even meta humor as long as it's funny, written cleverly, or delivered with funny timing or acting. None of that is here in Velma. Almost each joke has some sort of political or societal statement, and it's just so tiring to hear that in something that should simply be entertainment. And of course you can have an important message in your entertainment that even can be educational, but it gets annoying if the writers keep slamming you over the head with it. First, it's a joke about race swapping, then it's a joke about stereotype of lesbians, then it's a joke about toxic masculinity, then it's a joke about fat shaming, etc., etc. Rather than writing funny and clever jokes or a clever script, the writers simply put their ire and frustration that they have with society or their own time in high school. None of the characters are likable in the slightest. Anti-heroes have been done before and done well, to the point where you even root for them, but Velma is none of that. I cannot see how you can like or root for Velma, no matter what gender you are. The characters of Daphne and Fred have also changed, but, truth be told, is that I never really cared for both those characters anyway. As a kid, I thought they were just kinda vanilla. The straight-faced leader and the pretty serious girl who kept the group together, but nothing more than that. The characters I liked way more were Velma, who always contributed with her smarts, Shaggy, who just wanted to enjoy life and think with his stomach, and everyone's favorite, Scooby-Doo. They have actually started to give both Fred and Daphne more personality in more recent cartoons of Scooby-Doo. But yet again, in this series Velma, they are both so incredibly toxic and unlikable for no good reason. An adult show does not mean that the characters are rude or unlikable. I think that the writers should look up what the definition of an adult show exactly entails. Shaggy, who is called Norville in this series, which is actually his official name in the cartoon, was the least toxic. But since he's also not funny, he was simply a bit boring. But at least I did not hate him, unlike the other characters. Yet again, it does not feel like the Scooby Gang at all. I don't understand why they took the Scooby-Doo property and did this with it. If the writers had not taken that property and just made this exact same show without putting the name Scooby-Doo to it, it could have worked with at least part of an audience. But something that I noticed with recent Hollywood productions is that more and more often projects get made where the cast actually actively dislikes the property it is working on. The Witcher was a recent example where the writers actively disliked the source material and tried to yet again alter it to fit their own political agenda or viewing points. Now granted, often as a staff, you don't get to pick what project you are working on. One day you can be working on a Star Wars project or zombie horror, and the next you might be doing a romantic comedy, etc. These examples are a bit out there and exaggerated, but you get my point. Not every writer in Hollywood gets to choose what property they get to work on. But then to actively put your own hate or disdain for it is just pathetic. All in all, this show is just absolute garbage. The humor is just plain bad and sometimes very awkward without being awkward yet funny. A whole gag with Velma's father's new pregnant girlfriend letting herself being photographed in the nude with a baby leading out of her belly comes out of nowhere and is just a plain WTF moment without any laughter. The characters in here have no redeeming qualities and it's just not a good time to watch it. The recently released High on Life game is full of snarky characters who constantly snipe at each other, and though not every joke lands there as well, at least I had multiple laugh out loud moments there, making it for an enjoyable experience. With Velma, there is no such thing. It is simply a script full of checkboxes to adhere to the hatred and temper tantrums of the writers regarding how they see society. In the series, they portray Fred as a crybaby, but in reality, it's the writers that are seemingly babies who cannot come over their high school trauma or how they think certain things aren't fair. They just complain and complain about it, instead of writing something clever that gets people thinking or talking. Then again, I think the entire world has agreed that this series sucks, so maybe they got what they wanted. Maybe it will even be such a success for people hate watching it, I don't know. The only thing is that I don't want anything to do with this Velma ever again, and look forward to the next entry of Scooby-Doo with the gang and characters we all know and love, instead of these imposters.